The Christmas lights on my parents' tree blinked in alternating patterns of red and green, casting shadows across the living room where I'd spent every holiday for the past 29 years. Some things never changed. The ornaments were the same ones from my childhood. The angel on top tilted slightly to the left, just as it always had, and my family's opinion of my life choices remained as fixed as the North Star. From my vantage point on the velvet armchair, the panoramic view of Lake Michigan was nothing but a wall of gray ice and swirling snow. It was fitting, really. The temperature inside my parents' penthouse felt just as cold. My name is Alexis, and I am 29 years old. To the world outside these glass walls, I am a ghost. To the people inside this room, I am a disappointment. My mother, Patricia, was currently rearranging the garland on the mantelpiece for the third time, her movements sharp and critical. My father, Thomas, sat in his leather recliner, swirling a glass of scotch and staring at the Weather Channel as if he could intimidate the snow into stopping. And then there was my brother, Brandon. The golden boy. The vice president. He was currently leaning against the marble kitchen island, laughing too loudly at something his wife, Samantha, had said. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. Is it snowing where you are, or are you lucky enough to be somewhere warm? I'm reading every comment. It was the same script we followed every year. The air smelled of expensive pine candles and unspoken judgment. I checked my phone, not for messages, but just to have something to look at that wasn't their expectant faces. So, Alexis, Brandon's voice cut through the room, smooth and practiced, the voice of someone used to closing deals. Still doing the freelance computer thing? He didn't wait for an answer. He never did. He just wanted to remind everyone in the room that while he was managing portfolios, I was managing whatever he thought I did. Fixing printers, probably. Or designing websites for dog walkers. It's going well, I said, keeping my voice level. Busy. Busy is good, my father grunted, not looking away from the TV. Busy pays the rent. Or does it? You still in that rental downtown? It's a loft, Dad. And yes. I didn't mention that I owned the entire building. I didn't mention that the loft was a 4,000 square foot sanctuary of smart glass and biometric security. Why would I? They had decided who I was 10 years ago when I chose coding over law school. I was the quiet one. The weird one. The one who stared at screens instead of networking at the country club. Samantha chimed in then, her voice sickly sweet. You know, my cousin is looking for an IT girl for her boutique. It's part-time, but it would get you out of the house. Meet some people? I smiled. A tight, practiced smile that didn't reach my eyes. Thanks, Sam. I'll keep that in mind. My mother finally turned away from the fireplace. She wiped her hands on a linen napkin as if she'd been doing manual labor instead of moving pine cones 3 inches to the left. We just worry about you, Alexis. You're almost 30. You can't just float forever. You need stability. Benefits. I have benefits, Mom. Do you? She raised an eyebrow, the same look she used to give me when I brought home a B+ in history. Because from where we sit, it looks like you're drifting. And we? She glanced at my father, a silent communication passing between them. We decided it's time to intervene. The room went quiet. Even Brandon stopped checking his watch. This was it. The ambush. My father reached under the side table and pulled out a large, heavy envelope. It was cream-colored, thick cardstock. Expensive. We got you a little something extra this year, he said, holding it out. Consider it an investment in your future. I took the envelope. It felt heavy in my hands. For a split second, a foolish, childish part of me thought, maybe it's a letter. Maybe it's an apology for forgetting my birthday last month. I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a glossy, trifold brochure. On the cover, a woman in a power suit was climbing a mountain, looking triumphantly at the sun. The text, in bold, gold foil, read, "The Catalyst Program, Life Coaching for the Aimless Millennial." I stared at it. I flipped it open. The price list was tucked inside, circled in red ink. The total transformation package, $8,500. "It's fully paid for," my mother said, her voice trembling with what she probably thought was generosity. 12 weeks. They help you with your resume, your confidence. They even have a stylist to help you dress for the job you want, not the job you have. "We just want to see you launch, kiddo," Brandon added, swirling his drink. "You've been on the runway for a decade." I looked down at the brochure. At the smiling woman climbing her fake mountain. And then I looked at my family. They weren't looking at me with love. They were looking at me like a project. A broken faucet that needed a plumber. A problem that could be solved with $8,000 and a stylist. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to fix me. Because my silence made them uncomfortable. My lack of a prestige embarrassed them. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't shame. It was the feeling of a switch being flipped. A circuit closing. "Thank you," I said. My voice was very quiet. "This clarifies everything." "Good," my father said, settling back into his chair. "I knew you'd see reason." And then, the massive television behind him, the 80-inch screen that had been silently displaying weather maps, suddenly flashed red. Breaking news. The sound was muted, but the cheer-in was screaming in bright yellow letters. Tech IPO shatters records. Valuation, $4.2 billion. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mother frowned at the screen. "Oh, turn that down, Thomas. It's too bright." But Brandon was staring. He took a step closer to the TV. "Wait. Wait a second." He grabbed the remote and unmuted it. Sources confirm that Aegis AI, the secretive cybersecurity firm protecting 30% of the global banking infrastructure, has gone public this morning in a surprise direct listing, the anchor said, her voice breathless. But the real story is the founder. For 5 years, she has been known only as the architect. Tonight, we can reveal her identity. A photo filled the screen. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't a family photo. It was my official press headshot. Black turtleneck, stark lighting, eyes looking directly into the camera with a terrifying intelligence. Underneath my face, the words were typed out in high-definition clarity. Alexis, surname. Founder and CEO. Net worth, $4.2 billion. My father's glass slipped from his hand. It hit the marble floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot. The brochure for the life coach was still in my hand. I looked at it. Then I looked at the TV. Then I looked at my brother, whose mouth was opening and closing like a fish on a hook. I took a sip of my water. "You missed a spot," I said to my mother, pointing at the garland. "It's still crooked." The anchor on the screen continued to speak, her voice filling the sudden vacuum of the room. She was detailing the specifics of the initial public offering, listing numbers that were so large they sounded abstract, like coordinates to a distant planet. $4.2 billion. It was a number that didn't just buy real estate, it bought influence. It bought immunity from the kind of petty, living room tribunals I had endured for a decade. I watched my family recalibrate in real time. It was fascinating, in a clinical sort of way. Like watching a computer crash and attempt to reboot with a completely new operating system. My father was the first to move. He didn't look at me. He looked at the shattered remains of his Scotch glass on the floor, then back at the television, as if checking to see if the image of my face would disappear if he blinked hard enough. It didn't. The screen cut to a clip of me walking out of the New York Stock Exchange earlier that morning, flanked by security, wearing a coat that cost more than my brother's car. "This is..." Brandon stammered, his face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "This is a mistake. It's a prank. Some AI deepfake thing." He looked at me, desperate for me to nod, to tell him it was all a joke so he could go back to being the vice president and I could go back to being the cautionary tale. It's not a prank, Brandon, I said softly. But you live in that loft, my mother whispered. She was trembling. We sent you checks. I bought you a portfolio case. I know, Mom. I still have it. It's in the closet. Why didn't you tell us? Her voice rose, cracking into a high, shrill note of accusation. You let us sit here and worry about you. You let us think you were failing. How could you be so cruel? There it was. The rewrite. In less than 60 seconds, they had managed to twist the narrative. I wasn't the victim of their judgment, they were the victims of my silence. They weren't bullies, they were concerned parents who had been tricked. I tried to tell you, I said. 3 years ago. Christmas Eve. I told you I secured funding for a proprietary neural network. You asked if it was a pyramid scheme. We were protecting you, my father barked, finding his voice. He stood up, stepping over the broken glass. His authority was shaken, but his ego was intact. He pointed a finger at me, a reflex he couldn't control. We pushed you. You think you'd have that drive if we hadn't been hard on you? If we hadn't demanded excellence? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had spent 20 years asking why I couldn't be more like my brother. You didn't push me, Dad, I said. You ignored me. There's a difference. Don't you speak to him like that, Brandon snapped. He moved toward the island, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. There's something shady about this. No one makes $4 billion legally in 5 years. Not without us knowing. Who's the real backer? Who are you fronting for? He couldn't conceive of it. In his world, success was a ladder you climbed one rung at a time, shaking hands and kissing rings. The idea that I had built an elevator in the dark, bypassing his entire reality, broke his worldview. I watched them spiral. It reminded me of a concept in behavioral psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect, but inverted. The incompetent are often loud because they lack the self-awareness to doubt themselves. My family had been loud for years, broadcasting their mediocre success as if it were the gold standard. I had been quiet not because I was weak, but because competence doesn't need to shout. When you are building the foundation of the global economy, you don't need to brag about your bonus at the dinner table. It's all vetted, Brandon, I said, my voice bored. The SEC filings are public record. You can check them on your phone. Assuming your bank's firewall lets you access them. We actually handle your cybersecurity, so I can probably whitelist the domain for you if you need it. He froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Samantha, who had been scrolling frantically on her phone, suddenly looked up. The sneer was gone, replaced by a hungry, predatory gleam. Alexis, she said, her voice breathless. This article says you're opening a venture capital arm. 4 female-led startups. She walked around the counter, stepping into my personal space. She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers lingering on the fabric of my sweater as if testing the quality. You know, I've been thinking about pivoting the boutique, she said, her eyes wide and unblinking. Scaling up. We just needed the right, strategic partner. We're family, right? Family supports family. I looked at her hand on my arm. 5 minutes ago, she was offering me a part-time job fixing printers. Now she wanted a seed round. Family supports family, I repeated. I looked at the brochure on the table. The Catalyst program. For the aimless millennial. Is that what this was? I picked up the brochure. No, that was. My mother reached for it, but I pulled it back. This was you trying to fix me, I said. Because you looked at my life and saw a broken reflection. You didn't want me to be successful. You wanted me to be understandable. You wanted me to fit in the box. We wanted you to be happy, my mother sobbed. No. You wanted to be comfortable. I stood up. The movement was small, but it sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Where are you going?" my father demanded. "We are not done discussing this." "I am," I said. I picked up my purse. "I have a crisis management meeting in 20 minutes. Apparently, becoming a public figure on Christmas Day creates a bit of a logjam in the PR department. "You can't leave," Brandon said, stepping in front of me. He looked small. He looked like a middle manager realizing he was speaking to the chairman of the board. We need to figure out what this means. For us. It means nothing for you, Brandon," I said. "You have your job. You have your bonus. You have your stability." I walked past him. He didn't try to stop me. "Merry Christmas," I said, without looking back. I walked out of the penthouse, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me with a finality that felt like a guillotine. I walked down the marble hallway to the elevator. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from my chief financial officer and 1 text message from an unknown number. I opened the text. It was a link to a secondary news article, timestamped 2 minutes ago. Aegis AI announces strategic acquisition of regional banking security infrastructure. I stopped. I read the list of acquired contracts. My heart didn't race. It slowed down. A cold, heavy weight settled in my stomach. This wasn't just success anymore. This was fate having a cruel sense of humor. I pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator doors slid open, revealing my reflection in the polished brass. I didn't look like a daughter. I looked like an apex predator. The game had just changed. I wasn't just the one who got away. I was the one who had just bought the building. The lobby of the building was a gauntlet. The doorman, a man named Henry who usually offered me a polite nod and a comment about the weather, was now holding back a wall of photographers. He looked terrified. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he straightened his posture so violently I thought he might snap a vertebrae. "Ms. Surname," he stammered, opening the heavy glass door. The car is right here." It wasn't a taxi. It was a matte black SUV with reinforced glass, idling at the curb like a tank in a tuxedo. My head of security, a man named Silas who spoke less than I did, was already standing by the open rear door. The flashbulbs went off like a strobe light, blinding and white against the falling snow. "Is it true you're the majority shareholder?" someone shouted. "Ms. Surname, comment on the bank acquisition." "Alexis." "Look here." "Alexis." I didn't look. I slid into the back seat. The door thumped shut, sealing out the noise, the cold, and the sudden, violent celebrity. The interior smelled of leather and recycled air. Silence. My phone rang. It wasn't a reporter. It was Brandon. I stared at the screen. The contact photo was a picture of him on his sailboat, wearing sunglasses, holding a glass of champagne. The image of a man who thought he had won the game before halftime. I answered. I put it on speaker and set the phone on the center console. "You knew," he breathed. He wasn't yelling. He sounded like he was in shock, like someone who had just looked down and realized he was walking on air. "You knew when I was talking about my bonus. You knew when I was bragging about the merger. I knew Aegis was acquiring a portfolio of regional financial security contracts," I said, leaning back against the seat. "I didn't know your specific bank was in the tranche until 2 minutes ago. You aren't that important, Brandon." "Not that important?" His voice cracked. "Alexis, you own the controlling stake. You're the chairman of the board. You're my boss. Technically, I'm the boss of the board that hires the CEO who hires the regional manager who hires you. So, yes. I suppose I am." "My stock options," he whispered. "The restructuring. They said there would be layoffs. Redundancies. Efficiency calibration," I corrected. "We're replacing the legacy security protocols with AI oversight. It's safer. Cheaper. Am I a redundancy? I looked out the tinted window. The city was blurring past, streaks of gold and red light in the snow. I thought about the life coach brochure. I thought about the way he had laughed when I said I was busy. I thought about the Catalyst program designed to fix my aimless life. You're a vice president, Brandon, I said coldly. You've always told me that the market is a meritocracy. That the cream rises to the top. That's why you deserve the bonus and I deserve the brochure, right? Alexis, please. Don't do this. I have a mortgage. Samantha just ordered the spring line for the boutique. I'm not going to fire you, Brandon. I heard him exhale, a jagged, desperate sound. Thank God. Okay. Okay, thank you. I knew you wouldn't. I'm not going to fire you, I repeated, cutting him off. But I'm not going to protect you either. The AI audits performance metrics blindly. It doesn't care about your last name. It doesn't care that you were the captain of the debate team. If your numbers are good, you'll stay. If they aren't, well, I'm sure there's a life coach who can help you with your resume. Alexis. Goodbye, Brandon. I tapped the red icon. The phone rang again immediately. My father. I let it ring 3 times. I imagined him in that penthouse, standing amidst the broken glass, looking at the view that suddenly felt like a cage. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling because he had just realized that the aimless millennial he tried to fix was now the custodian of the economy he relied on. I answered. Alexis, he said. His voice was different. The authority was gone, replaced by a trembling, uncertain deference. We need to talk. There are implications. The trust fund. The portfolio management. I use that bank. I know, Dad. We need to ensure that the family assets are insulated. We need a meeting. Tomorrow. I'll clear my schedule. I can't meet tomorrow, I said. I have to fly to Zurich. Zurich? But. I'm sending you a number, I said. It's for my family office. Not me. My staff. They handle inquiries from extended relatives. Extended relatives? I am your father. You were my father when you handed me that brochure, I said. Now you're a client. And I'm very busy. Alexis, wait. You can't just. I'm engaging the firewall, Dad. The what? The firewall. It blocks unauthorized traffic. Harmful entities. Liabilities. I am not a liability, he shouted. Yes, I said softly. You are. I hung up. I didn't just end the call. I opened the settings. I selected their contacts. Brandon. Mom. Dad. Samantha. Block caller. Block caller. Block caller. The silence that filled the car wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the sound of a bridge burning, the timbers snapping and falling into the river below. It was the sound of a $4 billion door locking shut. I looked at my hands. They were steady. Silas, I said to the front seat. Ma'am? Take me home. The quiet one. Yes, ma'am. The car surged forward, cutting through the snow, carrying me away from the penthouse, away from the judgment, away from the people who had loved a version of me that never existed. I watched the city lights reflect on the glass. I was alone. And for the first time in 29 years, I wasn't lonely. I was free. The car stopped. The engine cut, and the sudden absence of vibration felt like the world taking a deep breath. We're here, ma'am, Silas said. I looked up. We weren't at a hotel. We weren't at a PR firm's crisis center. We were parked in the private underground garage of a converted industrial warehouse in the West Loop. My building. My sanctuary. I stepped out. The air here was still cold, but it didn't bite the way it did at my parents' place. It felt crisp. Clean. I took the private elevator up to the top floor. When the doors opened, the lights automatically adjusted to my biometric profile, a soft, warm amber that flooded the open concept space. The floor-to-ceiling smart glass turned opaque, shutting out the city, the snow, and the prying eyes of a world that had just discovered my name. I walked into the kitchen. It was modern, minimalist, and exactly how I liked it. No pine garlands. No tilted angels. Just clean lines and silence. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand, which had been steady in the car, was trembling slightly now. Not from fear. From the adrenaline crash. From the sheer, exhausting weight of having dropped the mask I'd worn for 3 years. I walked over to my workstation, a massive oak desk overlooking the city skyline. My laptop was there, humming quietly. I sat down and woke the screen. The notifications were endless. Emails from investors, texts from old classmates, LinkedIn requests from people who wouldn't have looked twice at me yesterday. I minimized them all. I opened the terminal. The code scrolling down the screen was green and familiar. The neural network that protected millions of accounts, that secured the retirement funds of men like my father and the bonuses of men like my brother. It didn't care about my last name. It didn't care about prestige. It only cared about logic. Truth. I thought about the brochure for the life coach. For the aimless millennial. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was a microchip, the prototype of the first processor I ever designed. I turned it over in my fingers. My family had looked at my silence and seen emptiness. They didn't understand that silence is where the architecture happens. While they were busy decorating the facade, I was reinforcing the foundation. While they were shouting for attention, I was building the stage they were standing on. They would never truly understand. They would spend the rest of their lives rewriting this night, telling their friends at the club how they always knew I was special, how they nurtured my genius. They would gaslight themselves into being the heroes of my story. But I knew the truth. And for the first time, that was enough. I wasn't the one who got away. I was the one who stayed, built the fortress, and then locked the gate. I took a sip of water. I typed a command into the terminal. The system purred, green lights blinking in a steady, rhythmic heartbeat. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. I was simply operational. If you've ever had to build your empire in silence because no one believed in you, share this video. Let's remind the world that the quietest people are often the ones holding it all together. Subscribe for more stories of justice.